After the longest stretch of silence we've seen from her since this whole storm started, it's finally that moment when it comes to Clarissa Shields. The cracks are here, the receipts are here, and Clarissa has decided to not throw one shot or two shots or even three shots from one platform under one single account. Instead, she has chosen that she is approaching the most important chapter of her entire career and personal brand with three separate digital battlegrounds, which means that we are now watching this woman wage a campaign across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all at the same time. And before we go any deeper into why she is doing this and how the public is receiving it, please be sure to leave a like, hit subscribe, and hype up the video. And listen, you know I'm going to need that support. So drop that like. And hype up the video too while you're at it, because this is a massive day in female boxing, in celebrity culture, and in online drama. No matter what side of this you find yourself standing on, monumental things are unfolding, and there are going to be monumental consequences for everybody involved. I mean, things are really getting wild out here. Nigeria finally pulled the curtain back. Shalita walked out from a decade of silence to confirm the whispers, and Clarissa, instead of facing any of it like the championship boxer she claims to be, has decided to hide behind memes. But seriously, I just want to begin this conversation by looking at the cold hard facts and just pointing out that with Clarissa giving the world pretty much an entire digital meltdown spread across her Facebook page in the form of how many cryptic subs got their own little caption treatment that ended up being reposted on her main profile. And then with Clarissa not just running her mouth on Facebook, but quietly pulling the trigger on Twitter and dropping subliminals on what she lovingly calls the Instagrammies, this has never been done from a so-called undisputed champion of her caliber ever in terms of producing three different battlegrounds in one single emotional spiral. And with that, what you have to see, even if you are the biggest Clarissa Shields fan out there and you're the biggest GWOAT lover, or whatever it is the camp wants to be called these days, is that, well, after going on what feels like a multi-year emotional crusade against anybody who dares question her, which is by far the longest stretch we have seen Clarissa go without accountability, to get three entire social media meltdowns, and the spectacle fans got across her Facebook timeline. You got fireworks with this rollout. Listen, it's okay. We can admit it, and I'll start it off. Say it with me. Thank you, Nigeria, for pulling the curtain back and finally giving Clarissa the moment that has forced her to pretend that she is unbothered. Because seriously, to launch this many subs across three separate platforms in 1 week and put out all these little captions, which were very strategically timed, I will give the Clarissa camp that they made this meltdown look way more controlled and sound way more composed in the early posts compared to when the Facebook thread actually hit the timeline. And that's important just with me saying that last point. That's it. That's the point. The fake gratitude post, the overabundance of memes and subliminals, and just everything. It's all here to send a message, which has nothing to do with anything in and around the actual receipts themselves. And I hate to be the one to break the truth to a lot of you people, but it's all merely here to be window dressing on the effort that Clarissa is trying to make to spin a comeback, where there is still no real central strength, no honest accountability, and no message that unites people on why they should ever come back to her and support her. Other than that, she just keeps reposting memes. I mean, even if you think about how hyped up the GWOAT branding was as a movement, and how big of a deal her team made of this image to just immediately watch it crumble under three separate platforms of pettiness that came out of absolutely nowhere. Well, it makes for a juicy buzz headline and lame social media posts for blog admins who love their jobs, where they can run their petty old templates like this. All it is doing is diluting the message and what is being said about Clarissa as a champion, and even what her so-called legacy ended up accomplishing. And just looking at what really matters, especially for Clarissa, and especially for a brand where you put the crown as your whole personality, which seems to be a clear nod to the woman whose career you wanted to break a record over with Layla Ali, well, in terms of trying to grab that legacy and that all-time spot, if everybody now has dozens of different reference points for why you are a fraud across three different platforms, you think you're finally going to get that respect still. But you know what? Let me slow down, because the more you think about it, a lot of this actually makes a sick kind of sense. And just don't be fooled yet, because while a lot of people thought Clarissa was doing the bigger person move and stepping away, all three battlefronts are still operating under her own fingertips, the same fingertips that have been on the trigger for years now. And while Clarissa swears at her doubters here and creates a bigger mess with them than we have ever seen, as she has now made this thing fully public, which we will get into later, that isn't why Clarissa is firing subs across 3 apps. It was not to do the modern grown woman maneuver, or anything like that, but primarily it was for one very simple reason. To flood the timeline, flood the algorithm, and flood the system with so much pettiness and so much noise that you can't escape it. And even if it underperforms with the sheer mass of subs that are out there, it is going to look like a massive show of confidence regardless, in a moment where every screenshot from Nigeria, Shalita, Remy supporters, Franchon, and the boxing community is sitting in your mentions. It's a hype metric. If people have interest in your downfall, you're most likely going to get those engagement placements. Clarissa is probably going to make every single one of these little subliminals trend in their own way, which both seems to be the standard and protocol in celebrity meltdowns now. And even with that strategy, that number of subs would be a personal record for the most thinly veiled shots fired at family members, former friends, and a sitting legend in a single week, surpassing none other than Clarissa's own prior crash-outs, which were sitting at a respectable count from her past Twitter sprees that did the exact same thing we are seeing here all over again. And again, no matter if there is not a true defense, nobody resonates with this thing, and even if the receipts are damning, the distraction and size of how much pettiness we got is going to make it look like she didn't fail to the general public, who is already clapping their hands over this because the headlines and the programming is working. Anytime you see something like Clarissa drop subs on 3 platforms in 1 week, there are buzzwords in there that make it sound inherently exciting. And if you're not tapped in, you might just get fooled and end up scrolling through one of these. And I have to say, for Clarissa, considering she clearly has no confidence in herself behind closed doors, this is actually pretty calculated as a manipulator. If we look at this from another level, with this much pettiness dropping across 3 platforms at once, and people planning to keep up not just in one sitting but over days, and if they got through it, they had to sit for hours to talk about it. Well, with these very different experiences all different viewers are going to take, it has decentralized the conversation around the actual receipts in a way we have never seen. And, of course, that is going to decentralize everything that's going on with it, good and bad. Which, while that may go against you in terms of getting a genuine apology, in terms of just making this look as composed as possible, without any of the criticism your recent statements have gotten, this is a solid tactic to stat pad your way to looking a lot more in control. And it really is not a surprise. Because if we look at Clarissa, this is going back to the same playbook we saw years ago when the Layla Ali situation went sideways, where with a massive online flood of clapbacks across 2 distinct platforms, you were able to wash out any criticism by flooding the timeline with way too much commentary. That's what happened back then. And from walking out of that Layla Ali fallout and really looking better in the process because of how loud your numbers and your hype were, because of how long you could keep the heat on yourself, Clarissa was able to get a pass from that. And obviously, while the situation is different here, Clarissa is still banking on pulling the same thing off. But listen, if you're just going to make a scaled-up Layla Ali fallout, and that's really what this is in terms of what it's representing, don't give us a list of subliminals that is going to make something as bloated as that old beef now look as restrained and well-curated as a 5-minute apology video. Because seriously, with this many shots fired across 3 platforms in 1 week, I don't think we need this many subliminals in one unified meltdown from literally any celebrity in the world, including some of the ones I think have the worst PR teams. It's just an excessive amount, which is obviously going to oversaturate things and get in the face of accountability. And just when you think about that, this is the conversation we are having. In a way, it shows that Clarissa does not respect her own legacy and does not want people to digest these so-called champion moments with the love and care most other athletes always would. Which, considering who this woman is, I just made the whole connection. Maybe that was way more intentional than we thought. Because while I have not scrolled through every buried meme yet because, again, I was not staying up till 2 in the morning refreshing Clarissa's Facebook page, why would I ever do that with the Facebook meltdown and the world beginning to see it before being distracted with all of these other Twitter shots and Instagram subs, which is showing you this grift and tactic in real time working on mass audiences, which it has, in terms of the distraction portion of it. Well, in the Nigeria interview where Shalita played almost the entire breakdown of the family fallout and showed everything Clarissa has been hiding, the world began to see it. And as we unpacked these clips and heard the receipts more and more, it only became more clear how bad all of it truly was. But the prophecy and the warnings were true. This whole thing really was the Snake Human storyline all along. And there are no ways around that anymore. Whether you love Clarissa or you hate Clarissa, you cannot say otherwise. Because really, for the biggest Clarissa fans now, do they realize that if they defend this woman, half the stuff they are reposting or quoting verbatim are clapbacks to what Nigeria, Shalita, and Franchon already laid out months ago? And speaking of the woman Nigeria, there's so much stuff on Clarissa's Facebook that is about her and what she did. This truly is the revenge meltdown just when you look at all of the Nigeria smoke alone. And this is undisputed for anybody who's going to try to ignore this plain-out fact. Look at the subliminals reposted this past week. I mean, the woman shared a meme that openly calls former friends bitter, salty, fat, mad, and sad, and is trying to act like it's a gotcha moment or it's funny. Meanwhile, to be honest, this meme has the best chance to be the smoking gun on the entire timeline, which is just so fitting because its caption uses language Nigeria herself was never described with when they were close. And with this repost, while so many bandwagon fans are flocking towards it with their toxic positivity sentiments, which they love to pull out in times like this because they stand on absolutely nothing and they are opportunists like a Pap and like a Clarissa, well, both prove they more than are. And really, that's a whole other pathetic thing. I mean, look at the way Clarissa and Pap are now buddy-buddy. But the way Clarissa can't forgive somebody like Franchon, who taught her half of what she knows. Well, listen, while I'm jumping ahead on why somebody who tried to act like the biggest tough woman in the world on this timeline, well, only is selective with the beef they pick. Because despite Pap creating the very entanglement that literally caused the domino effect that put Clarissa in the position to get exposed by Nigeria in the first place, she can be cool with Pap. They can pop out together. But with whatever happened with Franchon, they will never speak again. And speaking of the idea of standing on nothing, Clarissa continues her Nigeria obsession by making her own version of a clapback with a post too bitter for the timeline. This is the post we need to talk about. I will say it is definitely the most catchy line Clarissa has even possibly typed all decade, perhaps, because it is using that same sassy bounce and style that Nigeria has used for years for a takedown like this one. And in terms of Clarissa's delivery, while she pushes a caption here in the first half that starts off tame and feels relatively normal, the second half of this thread has her screaming at her former best friend and calling her every single name in the book as she just goes crazy making weight jokes, calling out the styling work, and trying to say, this is how you make a clapback. And this is how you write the comeback that Nigeria was looking for all along. Meanwhile, Clarissa, I don't know if you know this, but Nigeria's interview is the most replayed boxing-adjacent moment of the entire month. It's just stuff like this that makes this feel comedic. Because while Nigeria is delivering over the receipts, Clarissa has a knockoff version, and she's the one trying to act like she is in the lead, which just get out of here. I mean, you're trying to compete with the biggest expose in the female boxing space that we have seen, honestly, not even just in the past few years, but throughout the entire decade overall, and you got your B-tier wish version of a clapback, and you think it's going to do anything. I mean, it just really does feel like an absolute comedy watching this woman just descend and try worse and worse ways to make any sort of a comeback and to try and get any little bit more respected. And I wish I could say it stops there. Because as this meltdown goes on, and keep in mind, I'm not even covering half of the subliminals and half of the memes that we see Clarissa just blurt out all over this thing. Well, with Clarissa making entire posts and lines questioning Nigeria's relevance as she references a fake stat about her former friend's follower count dropping after a parody page that said a bunch of numbers were wiped out, which was never proven to be true and was actually proven quite the opposite. But Clarissa must be writing her captions from her private group chats and her little Pap-approved comment communities, and maybe they let her onto this. And getting even worse from there, with this devolving into the Facebook recap, ending with Clarissa going into a so-called favor from God post. And we see buried tags implying Clarissa thinks Nigeria's whole platform is inflated, and that everything Nigeria and her friends are doing is fraudulent. When you watch the timeline with this snake human meltdown, you'll see that Clarissa literally did create her own little victim universe to try and cope with how badly she lost the public sentiment battle, and why she is doing everything she's doing now. But at the same time, it's like she didn't want the world to fully read her not like her ripoff. Because when you make a post like this and you start spazzing out on the entire former friend group in Nigeria, and you make the message and make it a big deal in your rollout, but then have all this other noise make people talk about all of the other subs you put out as well, and all of the stuff surrounding it, it seems like Clarissa created the dices on this timeline, especially against somebody like Nigeria, not to actually reach Nigeria and show her that Clarissa is still watching her, and that she is not done with their back and forth from years ago, and instead, it's to prove to her remaining fans and her tag-along friends and grifters even that she is some sort of a tough woman, and that she's not afraid to do anything, because they don't seem tactical enough to either move the needle against Nigeria or even provoke her to say anything about it for the most part. But they are all over this timeline. We are still discovering more in real time, as Clarissa keeps calling out so much of what the women did. And with lawsuit-coded caption threats too here, which sound like when your mama says, "I told you so," or tries to explain something to you, and even if you knew it was wrong, she would give you a weak response you just had to accept. Well, that's how it feels when Clarissa tries to save and justify her behavior by saying, "I always thank God for his favor over me." I mean, kudos to you, Clarissa, kudos to you. You really sound like an enlightened and fully self-aware person. But on a serious note, with a lot of the stuff that you read on this timeline, especially with Nigeria, that is the perfect focal point. It really does make you question, when you read the way Clarissa talks about her. Were these jabs against these powerhouses made for the people about them to read? Or were they made to create more dressing for people that will get them into the landfill of Clarissa's social media content? I mean, this is the play right here. And so, I just have to say it. Don't be fooled. Because Facebook Gangster Day 1, or whatever we are calling this era, because now we have more than one platform, it's not designed for us to be talking about the big moments, the big picture, or any of the messages even that Clarissa was trying to get across in these posts that she led us on to believe were very important to her with everything she did in preparation in those interviews. And instead, we are supposed to just consume the slop, eat up your slop, and have any ideas about any of the material just get lost in the void. Also, it can serve to be the dressing of the big headlines that we'll read, if this all goes the way it should, that Clarissa is the first female boxer since the early days of women's combat sport to have the top 3 trending meltdowns on 3 platforms all at once. And then she is the celebrity with the most subliminals on Facebook in a single week ever. And I'm sure, with whatever engagement figures and impression numbers occur when you are tripling even the biggest flop Clarissa has ever had's numbers, they won't look bad. And that's it. Everybody who came into this thing looking for an experience that was supposed to be accountability-driven, you got dumped and you got lied to, because all you ever were to Clarissa was somebody she can manipulate to give you more mediocre clapbacks into trying to throw 3 of them on you this time. And seriously, with Clarissa trying to pull a hustle like this and make everybody believe she is the #1 in female boxing from mere tricks and stat-padded meltdowns, listen, Clarissa, you were calling out Nigeria so much, and you tried to start so much whether you meant it or not, that you were going to have to face everything you said. Not to mention in all of this, Clarissa has been dissing and making all these crazy claims while she has these alleged entanglements going. And I mean, with all this, could you imagine a bigger mess? I just could not. The fact that people are eating this slop up shows how lost the audience is. And the fact that people are not even thinking about the alleged foreclosure receipt, the alleged $7,000 bill that mysteriously disappeared, the alleged threats to relatives to keep them away from Shalita, just echoes that all the more. And let's just get into Shalita for one moment, because that piece alone deserves its own breakdown. How does Shalita, somebody Clarissa swears she hasn't spoken to in a decade, somebody Clarissa has tried so hard to paint as irrelevant and out of the loop, somebody Clarissa wants the public to believe is the last person who would have any kind of insider knowledge. How does that exact same woman walk into the room and lay out a full receipt-stacked breakdown of which relatives Clarissa is allegedly cutting off financially the second they so much as breathe in her direction? Make it make sense for me, because that is not how strangers operate. That is how somebody who has been around the dinner table, around the family group chat, around the holiday phone calls operates. And the fact that Shalita has all the tea while Clarissa is out here trying to gaslight the public into believing this woman is a nobody is exactly the kind of contradiction that exposes everything. You can't claim radio silence for a decade and then have somebody from that radio silence describe your entire financial control playbook with this level of accuracy. One of those things has to be a lie, and we all know which one. And then calling other people an op as if you're not the op there is. You're not loyal to anybody but yourself. You are only loyal to what you think is going to take you to the top. And you don't care who you have to step on in the process. You couldn't even wait for an alleged divorce, a virtual divorce, a phony baloney divorce, as far as I'm concerned, to even hit the docket between Pap and Remy before you decided to step out, because that was your answer to the revenge of y'all getting exposed. Oh, we should just pop out as a couple. As if that's not what you've been begging Pap for that entire time, all while you're allegedly entangled with Maserati Bud and others. Like, it's crazy work that Clarissa doesn't see that she is enough. She doesn't see how easy it is for her to befriend people and to pretend to like and respect people and pretend to hype people up and all of the things, only for her to snake all these people when there's no more use for them, or they dare be a fan of Remy, they dare like Remy, or they dare ask questions. See, Nigeria was onto something in her line of questioning about Remy and Pap on what the tea is, on what the dealio is, because that indicates that Pap was not around like Clarissa wants to make it seem. That indicates Pap was not always upstairs, or downstairs, or in the basement, or in any of those convenient little staged corners of the house. He was running to New York as fast as he could once lights, camera, and action is over. So, it's interesting that Clarissa crashed out per usual because, again, it shows that things are not solid between Clarissa and Pap. Because a mature woman wouldn't have even allowed this thing with Pap to even happen in the first place. You, the mature woman, would have told Pap, listen, look at here, if you're really interested in me and serious about me, which I don't even know who that woman is, but nonetheless, would have told Pap, get your divorce finalized before trying to talk to me. That would be for real. But Clarissa was so desperate to try to one-up Remy, or think that she is causing harm or damage to Remy by fast-tracking this thing with Pap, that in the process, she's completely destroyed her brand. She's destroyed her boxing career. She's destroyed the quality of female boxing opponents that potentially could be available to her because of her parading around with a married man and wanting to argue with anybody that calls it out. But you want to argue on the Twitters. You want to throw shots on the Facebook. You want to post subs and memes on the Instagrammies. As if people do not see you for who you are and what you are. Your family and friends know this thing with Pap is not what it seems. They know that there are red flags all over the place. And instead of you taking in their criticism, you cut them off. You get mad. And you're behind all the hate Remy gets. You can't fathom that Remy has a fan base. You can't fathom that people like and support Remy. You really thought that the Easy the Black Captain situation was going to ruin and destroy Remy. At the end of the day, Remy is still a celebrity. And there have been plenty of female celebrities who have had cheating scandals and have been able to bounce back. They've been able to bounce back because that's what an A-lister is. But the thing of it is, even the thing with Easy the Black Captain, it wasn't Remy putting it out there. It was everyone else that was. But y'all were banking on Pap to write out this victim role. Whole time, he's still sleeping on the couch at Remy's house. He never moved out. He never filed for a divorce. And he only did that performative filing with the crinkled up paper after the Breakfast Club interview last May. Fast forward to this May, and there's still no divorce decree. There's no divorce hearings. There's no parenting classes. There's no any type of appointments or any sort of schedule on the docket at the county. So who really is out here goofy? Who really is out here dumb? You do all that rah-rah-rah on the internet, but what's really good is the reality of things. That Pap, whether you are presently with him or not physically with him or not, does not want to let go of his wife. Does not want to be legally single from his wife. Because he knows one day, you as the mistress, everything's going to crash and burn. At some point, the money will dry out. He knows Remy has real A-list connections, real A-list relationships, like her relationship, for example, with Fat Joe. She has real respect in this industry. And she's been able to pivot and reinvent herself, and not just be known as a female rapper, but is on Mogul Time, is building her brand outside of being a female rapper. You, instead of building a real brand outside of boxing, decided the brand was going to be you and a married man. Make it make sense. And now you're mad at your friends and family that are exposing your master plan. So let me guess. Your master plan was you were hoping that by the scandal of Remy and Easy the Black Captain, it was going to take her down and you and Pap could be in public and live happily ever after, and everyone was going to accept it. All those people calling Remy Ma bitter and miserable and jealous and all of those things, all that came from your side, Clarissa, because that was all a projection. But now that the dust settles and people see you for who you are and they see Pap for who he is, they realize Remy was right all along. They realize Remy was right all along. And Pap, and you were playing in everyone's faces because you were hoping to replicate the success of the black love that Remy and Pap was getting. But because it's not happening for you, you call everybody broke haters, miserable liars when you're the lie. Calling people ugly, attacking people's looks, which shows me that's still an insecurity you have. But none of this has worked out for you and Pap. And now we are at the phase of y'all putting out fake news to prop yourselves up. And that's crazy work to me because you have enough accomplishments that you don't have to lie about your real success. But you're so insecure. You are still threatened by Remy after all of this time. You are so mad that people are not going in on Remy, that you keep doing all these antics and you're losing your friends and your family, and it's going to be to a point where there's only going to be Pap there. But how long is that going to last with somebody who hates his wife, and is in competition with his wife, and only wants to have a child with him, and hopes that it takes Pap away, his youngest daughter? That is some nasty work, obsessive, cringe, disgusting. And let's go back to Remy for a second, because this is the part Clarissa really cannot stand. The part where the woman she has tried to dismantle, in private and in public, is still walking forward like none of this has touched her. Remy is still booked. Remy is still being called by major brands. Remy is still being invited into rooms Clarissa would have to claw her way into. Remy is still respected by the very industry Clarissa keeps yelling at on her timeline. And every time Clarissa logs on to post another sub, another meme, another quote about favor and blessings, Remy is somewhere out there making moves that don't involve a single tweet, a single caption, a single mention of Clarissa Shields. That's the part that has to sting. The complete and total non-acknowledgement. The grown woman's silence. The simple fact that Remy doesn't have to dignify any of this with a response, because the receipts are already speaking on her behalf. And every time Clarissa screams into the void, all she is doing is amplifying the very thing she swore she was going to take down. And let's circle back to Franchon, because Franchon deserves her flowers in this whole conversation. Franchon, who has known Clarissa since before the bright lights, since before the championship belts started stacking up, since before the GWOAT branding became a personality, since before any of these brand deals and endorsements were anywhere on the horizon. Franchon, who taught Clarissa things in the gym that Clarissa did not know how to do on her own. Franchon, who shared rings, cards, press conferences, and career moments with Clarissa in good faith. Franchon, who kept Clarissa's entanglement with a married man a secret long before any of the rest of us even knew that there was a story to tell. And for Clarissa to turn around and snake somebody with that much shared history is honestly the part of this that should be ringing the loudest alarms for any woman still currently in her orbit. Because if Clarissa can do it to Franchon, who put in the work and who held the secret, what makes anybody in her circle right now think they are safe? The pattern is the pattern. And the pattern keeps proving itself. And let's not forget the toy drive piece either, because that one was telling. Snaking the children and the mother that came through just because you had a personal issue with the mom. That is not the move of a champion or a role model. That is the move of somebody who treats every interaction like a transaction, and the moment it stops benefiting her, the people inside it become disposable. The kids did not deserve that. The mother did not deserve that. And Clarissa, instead of owning the misstep, sent her siblings out to do the dirty work of clapping back at Nigeria for daring to bring it up. That is weak. Absolute weak sauce. But then, when it was her cousin in the line of fire, then it was perfectly acceptable for Clarissa to troll, to comment, to pile on, to drag the family name through the timeline herself. The double standard is so loud that it almost has its own theme music. And then, when it was exposed that the mysterious foreclosure was suddenly not a foreclosure anymore, and the alleged $7,000 obligation had quietly vanished from public record, Clarissa wants to go silent on that one. No quote post. No clapback. No caption. Just digital crickets. Anytime there is a flat-out lie, like being framed as the highest-paid female boxer, or being framed as the first undisputed woman, and all of those marketing lines, Clarissa does not say anything to correct the record. In fact, she actively promotes it. But the second somebody comes back with the facts, She calls everybody else the liars. That math is not matching. So, from here, we have to get back into the heart of the Facebook gangster era. Because, again, this is a woman who has no problem saying full names when it suits her. This is a woman who, any other week, has no issue dragging people, tagging people, calling people out directly, and using her full chest to do it. Now, suddenly, she wants to hide behind cropped memes and ambiguous repost captions and little laughing emojis hung at the end of a sub-like decoration. Listen, if you're a championship boxer, be about it. Be about it. But it's interesting that it's Clarissa that keeps ending up in every single one of these fallouts with people. It is interesting that it's Clarissa that keeps being at the center of every single one of these messy chapters with people. Like, all the negativity, all the chaos, all the monitoring spirits, all the drama, Clarissa is at the center of it. Clarissa is at the center of it. But she wants to log onto interviews and log onto the internet and play the victim and make it seem like everybody is an op and everybody is out to get her. When you befriended every single one of these people at one point in time, they were of a benefit to you. Nigeria was a benefit to you as long as she did your hair and styled you and helped you look the part. Like, we have to keep it 1,000 for what this really is. Clarissa is a user. Clarissa is the snake. She uses you and disposes of you just as fast. Just like she pretended to befriend Remy and was obsessed with everything Remy had going on day to day, sending encouragement, liking posts, commenting on posts, everything. All while quietly plotting on her husband. That is nasty. And not only that, you then go after her friend too. Disgusting. Disgusting behavior. So, for real now, we need to break down what she actually said on Facebook with the receipts in hand. Clarissa had reposted a quote that read along the lines of normalize telling your friends that they are bitter, salty, fat, mad, and sad. Then she paired it with a laughing emoji and the word op-ass with even more laughing emojis stacked on top. Then she followed it up with another caption that read it's like people live for negativity, living for chaos is crazy. And then the very next day, she dropped a final post that said, I always thank God for his favor over me. So that was Clarissa, the Facebook gangster, in full effect in real time. But we have to break down what she's really saying underneath all of that. It's funny that you do not think of Nigeria as bitter, salty, fat, mad, or sad, or any of those things, when y'all were cool. I never get that, right? You did not have these feelings about your so-called friend, your so-called good friend, your so-called former Olive when y'all were in the thick of it, taking pictures together, going out together, posting each other for the world to see. But now, all of a sudden, that y'all had a falling out, and everything is being exposed, that you are the center of the chaos. But it had been put out there that your friends really don't like you like that, and you're holding on to Nene for dear life. But your friends do not like you, Clarissa. They just like what you can do for them. According to Shalita, the alleged relatives that you claim to have threatened to cut off financially if they remain in contact with her. How does Shalita have all the tea, even though you supposedly haven't talked to her or seen her in 10 years? Make it make sense. And while all this is unfolding, you have to remember the bigger picture too. Because if Clarissa is dissing her family, dragging her former best friend, dismissing the woman whose marriage she allegedly stepped into, and now trying to grab the moral high ground for all of it, I would predict, and I'm sure we will find out in a lot more ways soon, that Clarissa's championship days, in terms of the public's perception of her as a clean and untouchable figure, are absolutely numbered. The brand deals notice. The sponsors notice. The community notice. The young girls who were supposed to look up to her notice. The female boxers coming up behind her, who were supposed to feel like they had a path paved for them by her example, they notice. And every single time she goes back to the Facebook well, or the Twitter well, or the Instagramies well, she is not building her legacy. She is actively withdrawing from it. But in the meantime, as you take your time with this Clarissa stuff, remember that Nigeria is the reason this entire conversation exists, and Shalita is the reason it has the documentation it has, and Franchon is the reason it has the historical context that gives it weight, and Remy is the reason it has the cultural gravity that keeps it spinning. For better and for worse. And so, Even if you find the biggest Clarissa fan, somebody loving every one of these little subs and memes, just laugh quietly to yourself and know that, deep down, with the greatest moment this deprived fan base has gotten in so long, the only reason it is even remotely notable to them is because of the interviews and statements and receipts laid down by Nigeria, Shalita, Franchon, and the legacy of Remy. And now, with all of that said, let me know your thoughts on everything around Clarissa Shields and what she just did across 3 platforms in 1 week. I really wanted to start off the discourse pointing out the sheer hypocrisy and the weird, delusional games going on around this entire thing that are really trying to mask and protect Clarissa in the process. And listen, there is going to be a lot more to discuss in the days ahead. So we will be back soon. If you made it to this point in the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hype up the video. I cannot thank you enough for your support. It really means everything to me. And if you want to stick around and see my full breakdown of the original Nigeria interview, the foundation of all of this, the moment the curtain truly came down on the entire GWOAT mythology Clarissa has been selling for years, well, to see that breakdown, which goes hand in hand with all the messes on her timeline and this weird dynamic between Clarissa and the rest of the world, you are not going to want to miss this one. So, check out the suggested video pinned right after this. Hype the video. Hype the video. Hype the video like you have never hyped a video before in your life. That is it. That is all. That is the end of the road and the end of the line for this breakdown. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you are notified the very moment I post brand new content on this channel. And with that being said, I will talk to you guys again very, very soon.